My name is Matt.
My name is Jess.
And I can't believe you haven't seen Goldfinger.
Well, in our grand tradition now, I have now.
I guess this is not only the first time seeing Goldfinger, this is the first Sean Connery James Bond movie you've ever seen.
It is. And if I'm being honest, probably the only Sean Connery James Bond movie I'll ever see.
Spoiler alert for the rest of this.
I think that sets the tone.
There we go. So welcome back to I Can't Believe You Haven't Seen. We are now at episode 7, or as I've been titling them with 3 digits, episode 007.
Ta-da!
Ba-da-ba-da. Yeah, we figured we probably couldn't waste this opportunity to do a James Bond movie, especially since you hadn't seen a lot of James Bond movies.
There's a reason for that, and now I'm wondering if we should have wasted this opportunity. However,
yes,
it was too perfect to skip. So here we are, having now watched Goldfinger.
Goldfinger, yes, from 1964. This is the third in the series of James Bond films. Dr. No and From Russia with Love came just before it, I think, in 1962 and 63. I think they were sequential, like they did one a year for a bunch of years.
That tracks.
This is the third, like I said, third James Bond film, third with Sean Connery starring as the titular James Bond character. It is directed by Guy Hamilton, who is actually most known for making James Bond films. He did do a series of films in Britain that all seemed like they have incredibly average to reviews for the most part, but he was a fixture in the British film industry, so he was given the chance after Terence Young directed the first 2 James Bonds. I didn't count how many he would go on to make after this, but he did go on to make probably 4 or 5 other
You didn't count
Bond
that?
films. Well, I could have, but I didn't.
Well, who prepares you for this podcast, honestly?
I know. Somebody should hold me accountable for these things. I suppose that's probably you, right?
Never mind.
It also stars Gert Frobe, German actor, in the villainous role of Auric Goldfinger. It also stars Honor Blackman, Harold Sakata, Shirley Eaton, and 2 of several mainstays of the early Bond franchise, Bernard Lee as M, and Desmond Llewellyn as Q, both of whom we had seen in previous movies and would see a bunch more. Desmond Llewellyn, I think, was in them up until the 90s. I think GoldenEye was his last one when he passed it off to John Cleese.
As Q?
Yeah.
I do kind of remember, to be fair, I haven't watched GoldenEye in many moons either, and that does sound familiar to me. So yeah, fair enough.
Somewhere along the line. And then eventually, I don't remember when Bernard Lee passed off M to Judi Dench, but Judi Dench has been M in all of the Daniel Craig Bonds.
Which is gonna be a problem.
And maybe it'll change again. Amazon just bought the rights to James Bond going forward, and obviously Daniel Craig is now going to be done as James Bond, so it'll be interesting to see where that goes, essentially. The only other big thing that I'll mention beforehand is we always talk about, like, awards or things like that. Goldfinger was the first Bond film to win an Oscar. It won for Best Sound Effects.
Okay. I had a moment where I was like, really? But okay, fair enough. Best sound I could see. Or sound effects I could see.
Yeah, so this is your maiden Sean Connery Bond voyage.
Yeah, so to give you kind of, I guess, context, I have seen several of the Daniel Craig, mostly because they've come out more recently.
Yes.
And I saw GoldenEye because, let's be real, that was everybody's N64 game.
Yes.
And so I think my cousin made me watch that, actually. But otherwise, not a ton of Bond. Certainly no Roger Moore Bond and no Sean Connery Bond. This was my very first Sean Connery Bond.
Yeah, and there's only been 2 other Bond actors. I'm sure people that are Bond fans will know this. Timothy Dalton, I believe, was in 2 Bond films in the 80s.
Also didn't see this.
And George Lazenby was in one in the 70s. at this point in time is that until they cast a new Bond.
Yeah, because I think they're switching it from Daniel Craig, aren't they?
Yeah, he's done now. So
yes, he's done being a Bond.
Yeah, so I know at one point there was a big push for Idris Elba to be the next Bond, but Daniel Craig signed on to do a couple more at that point. So
something tells me I would enjoy an Idris Elba Bond more, only because I unabashedly love Idris Elba, but...
Yeah, what's not to love?
Fair. But the sort of basis of Bond and who Bond is as a character is always going to be a problem for me. And so, interesting.
Yeah, and that stems back to the books, obviously. This entire franchise is based on a series of... I don't know if you'd call them novellas, short novels written by Ian Fleming from the 1950s into the mid-60s before he passed away. He actually passed away just before this movie came out.
Oh, I mean, R.I.P. Ian Fleming. Mm-hmm. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
Did you double check that, or did we kill somebody again?
No. Yeah, he very dead. He's been dead since the 60s. I know I've had that habit in our past episodes of saying or making it sound like people have died when they have not. I will not continue that here. Ian Fleming has been gone for many years.
I'm just busting your chops. So, this was a time.
Mm-hmm.
I think perhaps, because people don't get to watch this with us, they just get to hear us talk about this.
Yeah.
Anybody who knows me or has listened to any of the first 6 episodes of this podcast are going to know that I have a gender studies degree and that I'm a pretty staunchly feminist. So at the end of the movie, I feel it important to know that everyone should have an image. If you know what I look like, you'll really get this picture. I turned to you with the biggest frown on my face and said, well, that was a movie.
I think that probably had to do with the very end bad line, which James Bond films tend to do.
I believe my actual last note was that last scene. Ew. So we can come back to that. Actually, where I want to start is at the beginning. Mm-hmm. So my first note is the DVD menu open is terrible, but that's just for me.
Yeah.
Because it's trying to recreate the opening of the movie, and famously 007 movies kind of have that silhouette thing. And so the DVD menu is trying its damnedest to be that. But it's so schlocky that I was like, well, we're off to a roaring start here, aren't we?
It's a very dated Blu-ray that I have. I don't know how long ago it was made, but Bond films have been released and re-released and re-released and re-released so often that I feel like if you went through all the DVD menus, you could tell exactly when they were made because they were probably trying to be quote-unquote cutting edge.
Fair. If I cared to, or even enjoyed this, I would say we should do that as a project, but I didn't, and we won't. Because I did not. And it's funny because I do remember enjoying other James Bond movies, and perhaps part of this is the newer ones are not as outrightly misogynistic as this one was.
Yeah.
Now that's maybe unfair because I haven't seen them in a while. And
it's not unfair.
Okay.
This actually is one of the ones that is, I want to say, more dialed back. It's been a while since I've revisited a whole bunch of Bond films.
Dear God.
Yeah.
Okay. So I wanted to talk with the start, but I actually want to talk about the credits. So the opening and the closing credits, because I think this is one of those jumping off points that you don't always get with movies. We've had a few that we've done where it's like, My Best Friend's Wedding, for example. Yep. The opening credits made a difference. Mm-hmm. I think this did too.
Yeah.
And having watched the whole movie now, if you go back and look at that opening credit, and it was even happening as I was watching it, all of it is projected onto a woman's body. Mm-hmm. And it's all on a woman painted in gold. Yep. Because Goldfinger, I promise. To do that only 2 or 3 more times. That's maybe my favorite part of the whole movie. But it's so very common to have that be the thing, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Can't make sense. I didn't say any real words. It's so common for women's bodies to be the area on which violence is acted out, on which the action takes place, but she's not acting. Mm-hmm. So it's that doesn't set the frickin' tone for the whole movie, with the exception star asterisks of Pussy Galore, which is not a sentence I thought I would ever say out loud. I'm saying brand new things today. So we are introduced to sort of the villain, which Auric Goldfinger is a great name for a villain, just so we're clear.
Yeah, solid job. There's actually, other than maybe a few names, there's some pretty solid names in this film in general.
Yeah, I'll give them that for sure. So you are introduced to Auric Goldfinger without knowing you are, because this woman's painted in gold. Mm-hmm. You are introduced to essentially what's going to happen is that there's going to be explosions and all these like cool guy things are going to happen at the expense of or on a woman's body.
Yeah, and not just that. Once you get into the film, it's standing in for a dead woman's body.
Yes, and there are so many dead blonde women in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
What the hell? Anyway, okay.
More dead blonde women than in a Hitchcock film, even.
Yikes.
Yeah.
There's a sentence. So it's a cool, I want to say from like a film perspective, which is not something I talk about as much as you. Mm-hmm. I think it's interesting. It's a cool way of introducing that, but it is deeply upsetting. It is, yeah. And
so the James Bond title sequences became very early on the iconic thing that one of several quote-unquote iconic things that the franchise has carried on even today. You know, the opening titles for the two films before this one were also both quite distinctive. They're designed by a man named Maurice Binder, who became known... This was an era of movies where there was actually a lot of, like, a bit of a craze around doing interesting title sequences. And we've seen some of these. So there's another gentleman named Saul Bass, who also became really well known for this. He did the opening titles for, and I'm going to say a couple of movies that we've seen together.
Sure.
Dr. Strangelove.
Oh, fun. Okay.
With the coitus planes.
That's
refueling.
A great description.
He also did Charade, the one with Cary Grant and Audrey Hepburn.
I love Cary Grant.
Which is the very colorful, and it's a very, like, James Bond-esque type of
It is, since you're putting it that way.
There's a few that we haven't seen that are known for that. Anatomy of a Murder is one. The Man with the Golden Arm is one.
Are you just listing movies for the future?
No, it could be. Some of these you might enjoy. But doing a distinctive title sequence rather than just a typical sort of wipe of something just to show the names and get on with it. Bond early on had this kind of on lock as this is a new thing and it will bring people in, and being that they're entertaining films and that's kind of the main goal of them, it made sense. There is also a history of using women's bodies in them. The movie before this, From Russia with Love, does something kind of similar where it projects not images from the movie like this one does, but it projects the actual titles and names of people and then has a belly dancer going through different parts of it, which is part of that movie. So it's not the only time, and it won't be the last time in a James Bond film that they use the female form in the opening title sequences.
That tracks. I think part of the reason that it's cool, quote unquote, it's an interesting use of a title sequence. I'll give them that. My issue with it is the women are not actors at that point. They are not actively participating. They're just having the movie played out on their body and parts of their body.
Yeah.
So not the whole of a woman's body. She's not a whole being. She's an arm, she's a leg, she's a tit.
Yeah. It's kind of standing in for it being like a golden statue of a woman.
Sure. But I think it's a really interesting / apropos metaphor for how James Bond films, and particularly this one, at least this era, and frankly that era of the universe, treated women. Right? And very treated much. Women as body parts.
Yep.
And that's really what's happening here. I have to ask a question, because you mentioned the belly dancer from the opening credits in From Russia with Love.
Yeah.
Is that who we see in the opening of this? Is that who is... Because there's like a dance thing happening in Miami.
Oh, no. So that is a different... Dance.
I wasn't sure if there's any kind of like continuity here, or it's just... Oh, so Bond's just everywhere banging all the women. Driving his Aston Martin.
Yes.
Okay.
That is actually the best summation of James Bond, if you needed one sentence for it. is James Bond bangs all the women in his Aston Martin.
The end.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's the opening sequence, like the title sequence. It's also the closing credits. So this movie is bookended by and is filled with just bodies of women who don't have characteristics.
Yeah.
Who are not allowed to have any kind of character development because they're only there to prove that Bond is fucking suave. Speaking of character development, because we're going to talk about other characters, and I have a lot more to say about the women, but I'm going to close the opening and closing credits. If they are interesting opening credits, and I give them props for that, it does make you go, oh, okay, something's coming, as opposed to just, like, a title card of, and now James Bond in Goldfinger. Like, I get it. Also because that song is iconic.
Oh man, it's so I think probably maybe the most iconic thing from this film, and close to the most iconic thing in all of James Bond, is the music and some of the songs. Like, you go through Live and Let Die, and
also great.
I'm trying to think of the Duran Duran one, A View to a Kill, The World's Not Enough, Skyfall. So many of these films have these iconic songs by well-known singers, Paul McCartney, Duran Duran, Adele, because Shirley Bassey started the craze with this one.
And it's so good. Like, props to Shirley Bassey and this song.
Dame Shirley Bassey.
Excuse me.
She's phenomenal.
But yeah, so again, I think that the opening and closing credits, and to their credit, the closing credits also do that this is the end of this movie, but it's not the end of James Bond.
Yep.
Which is a much nicer way of doing that breadcrumbing than the frickin' Avengers, which spends half of a movie setting up the next Avengers.
Yeah.
So, and I mean, this is obviously in the 60s. This is 64. This
64.
is a different story.
Yeah.
Like, things are very different in terms of film then and now. But I like that it's don't worry, you'll get another one of these probably next year.
Yeah, it's serialized, as opposed to it being this long bit of continuity. Like, Bond is a spy and goes on different missions and wraps them up at the end of the story. There's a little bit of tick over sometimes, especially as you got later on with the Brosnan Bonds and the Daniel Craig Bonds.
Sure.
There is a little more continuity between some of the stories, but essentially you're watching a big Bond mission in one movie, and it ties it up in a bow at the end.
Yeah. And to be fair, I haven't read them, so to anybody who is a Bond purist who's going to hear me say this and be like, no, but I get the impression that's also how the books work.
I think
the novellas. So. Like, it's very much that sort of genre of book and therefore genre of movie. It almost sets the movie up like a TV show.
Yeah. Except
that you're not watching, Pow Slam Batman, Adam West once a week. You're watching, at this point, Sean Connery do Pow Slam and Slam, depending on the moment.
Yeah.
And the partner with whom he is slamming, so to speak. But you're watching that version of Bond.
Yeah.
But once a year instead of once a week. So.
Yeah, it's like a Roy Rogers story, essentially.
Well, there's another one we could get into, but we won't. So, yeah, that's kind of we'll do that. We are introduced early on to a couple of main players. And these are, peeps that are going to be big deals. One of them is obviously Auric Goldfinger.
Yep.
He's the bad guy. He's the clever and he looks like a bad guy. Let's put it that way. But he doesn't look like a classic villain. He just kind of looks like he could be a retired dude on the beach in Miami if you left him unattended.
Yeah, he's not imposing.
No, he just looks like a dude. But I guess that's maybe let's be real. I'm going to say that's the best way to be a villain. I don't know this. He's not imposing, but that's because he has Oddjob, the refrigerator of a man.
Played by Harold Sakata, who was a Hawaiian professional wrestler.
Well, that tracks.
Yeah.
I have some questions about my good friend Oddjob. We'll come back to that.
Great.
We're not introduced to Oddjob that early. We're introduced to Goldfinger, and we're introduced to Bond, essentially.
Yeah.
And his friend, whose name has completely escaped me, the American FBI agent.
Felix. Who also recurs movie over movie, and is actually played by different actors, too.
Well, Felix Everybody's got to be slightly different. So we're introduced to them kind of early on. And where do we find Bond? Oh, having his, back rubbed. I mean, there's a whole scene where he wraps up another thing, and that's fine. And now he's on vacation in Miami, or Miami Beach, and he's laying there having a back rub by some lovely lady. And Felix finds him and is like, we have to talk. And then he slaps her ass and says, you need to go. It's man talk. I cannot tell you, my immediate rage of, I hate this so much.
Yeah.
And
you wouldn't have done well in the 60s.
no, and I was going to say, I think it's important, because we've done this in other kind of conversations we've done, to set this movie in its socio-political timeline as well. Mm-hmm. The 50s and 60s are not a time when women have a ton of say in a lot of things.
No.
This is post-World War II. This is when women are being returned back to their homes because the men are back early so you can stop working. Mm. This is the rise of the nuclear family. It doesn't appear in a James Bond movie, but that's not the point. Yeah. There's the rise of this, women are to be housewives and raise the kids and all that sort of... You don't really have a say. Nothing's that important. This is also the rise of, Mother's Little Helpers and a lot of alcohol and drugs for a reason. Anyway, the point of this is the 60s is a free, because then you also have the hippies. We move into the 70s.
Yeah, a little bit later than 64, but yeah.
But it's starting that shift, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's a weird sort of in between that period, but you're correct. I would not have done well in the 60s, or I would have done great in the 60s and been burning bras and marching, because I absolutely would have done that. In fact, still do. Yeah. Not burn my bras; those are too expensive. The point is, it's challenging for me to watch that and keep in mind when this movie was made and when these books are written.
Yeah,
right?
Because they're written, I think this one was one from the 50s as well. So.
Yeah, so this book is written in the 50s. The movie that it's based on, the book the movie is based on is written in the 50s. The movie is filmed in the early 60s. This is sort of the climate in which we're operating.
It is the climate, but I think the movie does also take some opportunity to... I guess, enforce and reinforce, really, what it means to be sort of a quote-unquote real man, a real suave man, and
yes,
that is the James Bond way. He is... You could be a person that is very suave, that treats women with respect, and he doesn't take that opportunity most of the time.
I have no idea what you mean. He was so respectful when he barged into a hotel room. Okay, listen. Here we go. It's just going to be my beef with Bond. That's what we could call this episode.
Welcome to Beef with Bond.
Featuring Jess. So, this toxic masculinity of, well, I'm just here to, bang the bitches, basically, and shoot the bad guys from Bond. That's a terrible Connery impression. I'm so sorry. But it's not the place where toxic masculinity starts by any means, but it certainly feeds off of it very well. Mm-hmm. And this particular iteration of Bond in this movie, just in the opening 10 minutes of the movie, he throws the woman, because I'm talking about the Miami Beach part, but beforehand, he's fixing or finalizing another mission, and then he's sent on vacation, and then okay. So the other mission he finalizes that we don't know much about. He fries a dude in the bathtub, throws the naked woman, he goes to kiss that naked woman, then he gets jumped by this dude. So he throws her aside, fights with the dude, fries him in the bathtub, leaves the naked, dripping woman sitting on the ground, being like, the fuck do I do with this? Because now I have a dead guy in my bathtub, and he just leaves.
Well, to be fair, I think he probably leaves her there because she's looking over his shoulder as she's kissing him, because she's trying to keep him there so he can get belted in the head.
Ah, fair enough. Yeah, okay, because then he also sees, bad guy in her eye. So
yeah, that's why he does the positively shocking at the end when he looks right at her. So
got you.
You were trying to set me up too.
See, that I didn't quite pick up on. So fair. I just read that
Doesn't
as she
mean
saw.
It's great.
I picked up on that as she saw him moving. I didn't think about her being, but okay. It doesn't make it okay, but fine. So that's where that starts. Then we find him, being being massaged by this woman because what a terrible life he leads.
Do you remember what her name is?
No, because there's so many of them.
Dink.
For fuck's sake. So Dink is massaging James. Then he gets up, slaps her ass, tells her it's men's stuff. We never see her again. Cool.
Goodbye.
Then he's like, oh, this is Auric Goldfinger. And he's like, oh, he's winning. He's betting and he's winning and he's got to be cheating. How's that working? Because that's, James Bond. Super clever. He knows. So then he goes, accosts a housekeeper, which I'm sure they probably called maids at that point, accosts a housekeeper, steals the key from her while it's still attached to her, opens the door to this hotel room, tells her she's, I don't know, great or a doll or some sweet or some shit, closes, I might be raging about this, closes the door, goes and accosts the woman who's in the hotel room, who turns out to be Jill Masterson. Important to come back to. Turns out to be Jill Masterson. And so he then accosts her and finds out how Auric Goldfinger is cheating. And it's with her help. So then he, fluffs around with that, tells Goldfinger, hey, I'm coming for you, basically. Your days are numbered or whatever. And then proceeds to, bring Jill back to his room. Mm-hmm. Because there's nothing that turns a woman on more than a house invader.
I mean, yeah.
There's nothing I like more than having my safety and privacy violated. That's who I want to sleep with.
I mean, I guess if you were being employed by Auric Goldfinger, you probably are assuming that there's some sort of risk in there. Not that that makes any of that okay. It's a thing.
The entire movie, James Bond is just utilizing women to his own end without giving a flying rat's behind about who they are, other than their names. The fact that they all look the flippin' same, because with the exception of that first woman who is betraying him, whatever, they're all blonde in this movie. Mm-hmm. Every single last one of them is blonde.
Yeah.
Cool. And he's just so suave and debonair that everyone falls in love with him just by No!
James Bond's magical penis.
Like, oh, I'm so strong. And you see throughout the entire movie, this man manhandling women, and we're like, but look how big and strong and great he is. You grab my wrist twice when I'm trying to get away, and I'm kicking you in the nuts.
Yeah, James Bond as a character is not an especially kind look at the alpha male persona. From what I understand from, again, I'm not a Bond aficionado to be able to really have a deep dive in all of this or read a bunch of the books. From what I understand, the movies dial it down.
Gross.
From the books.
Gross.
And that, is also upsetting in its own ways when you really take it on its own merits. But yeah, there is not a lot of regard given to the fairer sex, as they probably would put it in the 60s.
No, it's gross. And it happens all the way through the movie, right? Mm-hmm. So then, Jill, and I think the other part that gets me in this is how disposable the women all are. Mm-hmm. But, okay, so disposable women, we'll come back to that in a second. But just the entire trajectory of James Bond is the same. He doesn't give a shit about anybody.
Yeah.
And I think maybe that's different in the movies I've seen more recently. Mm-hmm. And maybe it's not, and I'm just remembering it that way because memory is a weird thing. But the Connery Bond gives no flying fucks about any of the women. Maybe Felix. Maybe. He doesn't care a whit for what Q is telling him.
Yeah. Which is very funny, actually.
Which is hilarious, but also, I think, indicative of who Bond is. Mm-hmm. He's just, I'm untouchable, you're never going to get me, it's fine.
Yeah.
Do you know when the only time you see Bond panic is when the super awesome laser technology, holy the 60s, he's about to take his nuts off.
Castration will make a man do anything.
Can you imagine? And I think that for me is the crux of the toxic masculinity of this entire movie is the only thing that causes him panic is the thought that he won't have a penis anymore.
Yeah.
And, I mean, also he'd probably die. But that doesn't seem to be the issue, because the shot of the movie isn't, oh, it's coming to cut me in half. The shot of the movie is it's cutting the gold in half, and look at your crotch. Because that is where the movie focuses.
Yep.
Look at me talking about shots. Aren't you so proud?
I am.
And so, because the shot is so focused on his dick and balls under those pants, you get the impression that that's what he's worried about.
Yeah, totally. And I think that's probably why, so he probably come back to this a few times. Goldfinger is kind of seen as Bond films go, one of the best, if not the best of the old ones, certainly. And there are lots of like iconic moments of different things that have kind of been lampooned with whatever else. The laser cutting the gold with him on top of it, and Goldfinger just having a relatively nonchalant conversation with him as it happens, is probably up there near the top of the most iconic Bond in peril moments in
That's
the whole
fair.
franchise.
And it's interesting because you kind of get the impression, and this is probably a good segue into Goldfinger, because I do want to talk about him, but you sort of get the impression that Goldfinger is meant to be seen as this, like, he's an excellent criminal.
Yeah.
But though he has pussy galore on the payroll, doesn't have women falling all over him, right?
Right.
And so it says, like, well, he can't possibly be as cool as James Bond. But he's the one having a very chill conversation, because he knows the most important thing to you is your manhood, right?
Yep.
And so that's an interesting power play. And I just thought, what a fun, important highlight of this movie is that the only thing that matters to James Bond is his masculinity.
Yep.
And other people don't matter.
No.
All that matters is everybody else perceives him as being very masculine.
Yeah. And there's parts
alpha
of it.
male.
Yeah.
Oh, James Bond would be a red pill podcaster. Okay, sorry.
Big fan of the Joe Rogan Experience.
Ew.
Yeah.
That's an experience nobody needs.
No. And it's, I think you're right with the disposability of others, certainly of the people he's up against. You know, there's a reason why there's a James Bond film called License to Kill. He basically, with his credentials from MI6, has the freedom to essentially off whoever he feels like he needs to off. And with that also comes a certain amount of feeling like there's a disposability. It's like, hey, there's certain people you can kill and there's certain people you can't kill. You need to make that decision. And sometimes it's the wrong decision. And in this movie, and I think we'll get back to it a little bit, sometimes it makes him make decisions that are not very sound and actually put the wrong people in harm's way. And in this movie, it actually comes back to bite him several times.
I can't imagine what you mean. Yeah, so again, I'll come back to we're going to talk a lot about women in this one. But let's talk about Goldfinger.
Oh, yes.
And then we're going to talk about Oddjob, because we're going to put those two together.
Fair.
1, Goldfinger, you crafty bastard. So there is because I write notes, as you all know, and at some point I'm like, ooh, I want to talk about these things. I've literally written, are we all just flying cars on commercial flights in the 60s? What sorcery is this? Because you're watching them get on this plane after the initial, is it the golf game?
Yes.
Yeah, so after this, which is that funny, we'll talk about masculinity, and we'll talk about Goldfinger, right? You're introduced to him when he's, like, craftily winning the money in the beginning. Then he's trying to outplay, outlast, like Survivor, apparently. James Bond, when they're playing golf, and Bond and his caddy outsmart him because he's standing on the one ball, whatever, fine.
Yeah.
Like, oh, how clever are you? Please.
Yeah, he switches his golf ball after Goldfinger has cheated and Oddjob has dropped a ball out of his pants when he's actually lost one. Yeah. Yeah,
so they're both cheating and trying to get a one-up on each other because, you know, criminals and James Bond are both known for being very honest. So great. But you see that. And then they're getting on the commercial flight because they're going to Geneva.
Yeah.
And maybe this is actually a good time to talk about cars. So they put the car on the plane. And what? People just flew their cars places?
They still do.
It's just weird to me because I can't imagine it.
Yeah.
Like, I love Eloise, which is the name of my car. But I would keep her at home when we're flying places. I'll cheat on Eloise and rent a different vehicle.
Yeah.
So
there's a level of wealth there that doesn't really go with my
the privilege.
brain.
Yeah, it's the privilege. But I'm like, oh, are we all just flying cars? Like, oh, it must be nice. You want to have... No, it's gold. This is how he's smuggling things. And that's my, like... Oh, you crafty bastard.
Yeah, there's actually a lot of instances in this one to do with Goldfinger where it's not just like, this is my evil plan, that got absolutely done to death with other Bond movies and other movies spoofing James Bond, like Austin Powers.
Yeah, freaking laser beams.
Yeah, exactly. This is my grand evil plan. And you just go like, well, that's weird. Is he just that rich to take his car around? Which you can absolutely believe, because that is something a wealthy person would do.
And the man is known for being a gold broker and a jewelry designer.
He owns smelting factories.
It makes sense that he would be wealthy enough to do that.
Yeah. But having gold as part of your car is just like, oh, yes, this is a level of intelligence in somebody that is an evil villain that you don't typically associate.
And I think maybe that's why he's considered one of the best villains, is because he's crafty. Mm-hmm. He also gives no shits, but in a way that you expect a villain to not care, if that makes sense. Yeah. So he's having this conversation that's very nonchalant with Bond and the people around him while a laser beam's coming for Bond's junk. Mm-hmm. He is flying this car wherever he wants, because fine, whatever. He has Oddjob, who... we'll come back to. And he only needs Oddjob for why he needs him. He doesn't care, because he does lock him in the vault when they get to Knox.
Yep.
Like Fort Knox. And lock him in the vault with a bomb, which, thoughts on that bomb. And then when he has the whole big plot where he has the, like, 3 different factions who've come over, and he's talking about gold. So the Chicago, the New York, and the West Coast guys. Mm-hmm. And the one, I want to say Solo. The one guy goes, I'm getting the heck out of here. I don't like this. See you later.
Solo, something like that,
yeah. And so he's in the car with Oddjob. And then Oddjob goes and offs him. Because, please, like, you were ever going to get out of that.
Yeah.
And then he takes the car to a wrecking yard. And the car gets turned into a block.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, that's clever. That's a good way to, get rid of the evidence. Sure. Mm-hmm. No, they take the block and he takes it back to the house. And I'm like... what on earth? I believe my actual note is something along the lines of, why are we keeping but why keep the dead guy metal block is my actual note. And then right below that I've written, just gold. Yeah. So he doesn't care that he's destroyed what I'm assuming is probably a pretty expensive vehicle.
Brand new car.
Doesn't care that obviously doesn't care that somebody's been offed. He just wants the gold.
Yeah, he's like, my gold bars were in there. I want them back.
Goldfinger gives a shit about his gold.
Yeah.
And while I don't admire him for that, you kind of have to be impressed by his single-minded tenacity to get what he wants and only what he wants.
Yeah. Yeah, he's not your dastardly evil villain that will... he's not the Wicked Witch of the West. Where she will get Dorothy and her little dog too. He's like, no, I kind of just want gold and wealth. People, yeah, and do without.
He'll get rid of anybody who's in his way, but not in a like I'm going to plot to get rid of people. Yeah, if that makes sense. This isn't a whatever.
Incidentally, that car compacting thing. Not only did they actually do that, they actually did it to a real brand new car that they bought for that scene, and like actually rented out wherever it was in London or whatever. Sure. Went to it, had it done, filmed the whole thing, and then took it away in the other car for real, because this is the 60s and CGI is not a thing. It just spits it out like it's a real life Wall-E.
Ah, Wall-E.
Ta-da.
Yeah, it was a ta-da, right? Thankfully there was not a person in it.
Yes.
I did say, and I just want to, because I will talk about Oddjob, but that's kind of my overview of Goldfinger. I can understand why he is one of the most iconic villains. Yeah. Because he's so single-minded, but not in it's not dastardly. Like, it is, obviously, because he's going to go blow up Fort Knox. Yeah. it doesn't quite work. And he has this, we're going to use this nerve gas that takes out everybody, which also we'll come back to that scene because, boy, howdy did I laugh. But he's a criminal mastermind without being the sort of caricature of one.
Yeah, and he almost never is panicked. He almost never is angry.
He's sort of the same all the time.
Yeah, he's planned for everything. Even during the Fort Knox scene when they're being overrun and attacked, he immediately is like, well, I have a plan that I have a U.S. Army uniform on underneath this with a hat, and I'm going to escape. Like, I don't really care about the rest of my own people. It's that I know that if somehow they manage to come and get at us, even though I've taken all these precautions,
I'm getting the hell out of here.
I'm getting out of here. Uses a machine gun, gets out of there, sneaks away. And the only time he really is panicked is when he eventually dies in one of the last scenes. Like, he is always a step ahead of everyone, including James Bond and the U.S. government and.
Yeah, he's ahead of everybody, and it's only because we talk about putting a hole in the fuselage of a plane does he get somehow sucked out of that plane.
Yeah.
Despite the hole being incredibly small for him. But, I imagine that's how that works. I'm not an engineer. I don't know shit. So, yeah, that's Goldfinger, I think, fitting ending that he ends at the hands of, really, I'm going to say James Bond because it is him, but I'm giving Pussy Galore all of the credit here because she's flying the plane.
Well, he actually it ends up being himself because he shoots a hole in his own plane trying to shoot Bond.
Oh, that's true. He does do that. Yeah. So, yeah. You know what? Actually, I take that all back. I'm giving her the credit because she's flying the plane. But he does himself in. And I think that would have probably been the only way he could.
Yeah, probably.
That was the only fitting ending for Goldfinger.
Yep. No, that's true. Also, I mentioned German actor Gert Frobe that played this. Just a little bit of background sort of inside baseball about the movie. Gert Frobe, when they cast him, the director cast him because they saw him in a German movie. It was like, this person is amazing. Their representation said, yes, he can speak English, and got to set and could not. Like, it was not very understandable at all. So Guy Hamilton told him to speak his lines as well as he could, quicker than he normally would, because if it's your second language, you're processing in your head. He said, speak them more like it's your natural language. And they redubbed all of his lines. So they cast somebody to come in with the German accent and redub everything.
Wild.
Which is pretty astounding because when you watch it, I probably watched it 3 times before I actually knew that. And was like, oh.
Yeah, I would not have picked up on that. And usually I'm pretty good at picking up on weird dubbing stuff. You know how I hate that in commercials and stuff. So interesting. Okay, so that's fun. That's my thoughts on Goldfinger. The cars, and this is the only thing I'm going to say about it, and then I'm not coming back to it at all. But because we're talking about the cars. Is the Aston Martin just a Mario Kart?
Ooh, in the 60s? Yeah. They're not big. Especially that DB8.
Well, and it has an oil slick and a smoke screen and an eject button. It is one blue shell and banana peel short of being a Mario Kart.
Yep, absolutely. It's you're not wrong.
Like he's straight up one blue shell away from just winning the whole race with that Aston Martin. So it's a great car.
It's a great car. After that movie, became the most famous car in the world for maybe a decade.
Well, that tracks.
Yeah.
Because that was a very popular movie, and it's a popular franchise for a reason.
Yep.
I don't necessarily understand the reason, but I can understand the car, the marketing tie-in that goes with something like that.
Yeah.
So that's my only thought on the Aston Martin Bond car. But I thought it was funny because all I could think was, this is a Mario Kart. Even when he puts the side pieces out and destroys it,
scrape the tires.
It's a little Mario Kart. It's a little the bad guys from Greece.
Little Ben-Hur too.
Yeah, that too. Oddjob.
Oddjob.
Are you ready? I have several thoughts about Oddjob. They're great. One, is Oddjob actually just a refrigerator? Because he's built like a refrigerator, and Bond can't get anything to happen to this man. And the only way that Oddjob goes down is by being fried.
Electrocuted.
Yeah. So it's a short to his refrigeration system. That's number one for me. That's my number one favorite comment, I think. My second other favorite comment about Oddjob was Oddjob ? Like that, what a name.
So, like, you know, the James Bond names are always kind of a little too on the nose. This is a little too on the nose in the best and maybe funniest possible way. Because Oddjob is there to caddy when Auric is golfing.
Yep.
To chauffeur him or anybody else around.
Yep.
To order around any of the Korean minions. There's actually that's never really explained. And fight off anybody that is threatening Goldfinger, or occasionally take off his hat and slice anybody's head off, full on Peaky Blinders style.
So funny that you say that. My third favorite note I have about Oddjob is Oddjob the original Peaky Blinders?
we're the Peaky Blinders, just taking their influence from Korean strongmen that were actually Hawaiian.
I'm gonna go with no, because Peaky Blinders is set much earlier than this. But I literally had the thought of, oh, it's the Peaky fucking Blinders. Like, that's what's happened here.
Yeah.
I did not try and do an accent that time, and you should be very proud of me.
We've been good. We haven't done so many bad
No, but
accents
usually
yet.
with Peaky Blinders I do.
Yeah.
And K&K, my friends K&K can absolutely tell you I've tried, and it's bad. We watched all of Peaky Blinders together. And this one is a shout out to one of them. But which one is John? Okay, so Oddjob is great and truly, like, aptly named. Mm-hmm. And when you meet him and he's like, this is Oddjob, I'm like, okay, sure. No, you're right. He does all the odd jobs. Mm-hmm. He's like the Swiss Army knife of bad guy henchmen.
Yep.
I don't know that I have anything else to say about Oddjob.
He also is just the, like, first of all, he doesn't have any lines. He has a couple of grunts or ahs here and there.
Yeah, so he's mute. You're mute. Told.
And so he just... He does what he does. But he also, a few times, not super often, because he's pretty imposing most of the time, but there are a few times where you get the hint that in real life he's just this really nice, jovial man. Because when James Bond tries to throw a gold brick at him when he's fighting in the Fort Knox vault, it just bounces off him, and he just kind of gives this, like, genuine smirk of, like, nice try, that doesn't do anything. And I guess in real life, he is just the nicest, like, most gentle, warm human being.
That makes a lot of sense, actually. Yeah, I don't have a ton to say about Oddjob other than I loved him in his weird metal hat. And was he the original Peaky Blinder? Yeah. But also, Oddjob, are you also secretly a refrigerator?
Yeah.
Because that hat's got to be a magnet to stick to his head, like... How else do you keep that on there? Also, you don't ever see him doing it, but when Bond has Jill Masterson in the first girl that he's got in his room, he gets hit over the back of the head as well. And you don't see that it's Oddjob, but you see the outline or the shadow of him in the hat. And so you know it was him, but it's him because of Goldfinger. So, henchman style.
Yep.
He might be my favorite villain henchman maybe ever. I would have to sit and think about that a little harder, but it's great.
He's pretty great.
Thank you, Oddjob, for saving parts of this movie for me. Which is not something I usually say to the villains in a movie, but...
That's fair.
Okay. I'm trying to decide if I want to talk women and all of the women, or if I want to talk the end. But I think I'm gonna go with let's go with the women. Okay. So, through this movie, we have Jill Masterson. Mm-hmm. We have her sister Tilly, starts with a T. T. Masterson, who appears briefly. Mm-hmm. We have all of the blonde women from Pussy Galore's Flying Circus, which, let me just once again say a sentence I never thought I would say. Oh. We have Pussy Galore. Mm-hmm. We have Moneypenny. Mm-hmm. Am I missing one?
Dink.
And we have Dink. They're all thin, attractive, blonde women.
Moneypenny isn't, but yeah, she's more darker haired.
Okay.
Yeah.
But Moneypenny seems to be the constant as well, right?
She's M's secretary, so you see her across a ton of the Bond movies.
But Moneypenny also threw my brain a little because she's like, well, I could make you dinner. Like, it seems like it's a semi-serious, why don't you just marry me, James? And I was like, because he sucks. Girl, get out. Anyway, so that's Moneypenny. Miss Moneypenny, whatever. But this is the women being disposable. So he has sex with Jill. She dies by gold paint. Then he goes to Geneva, meets the one that's the sister who's trying to kill Goldfinger, makes this series of bad decisions, gets her killed. Yeah. And is like, oh, she's dead. Oh, well, toodles, poodles. Then he goes, I will say, I have one more woman out, so there's two that have some sort of agency in this that we want to talk about, but that happens. Then he ends up with, Pussy Galore and at the complex where he's being kept in his, like, weird prison cell and what have you. But there's all these women, like, they're all disposable to him. Mm-hmm. They don't get to have character. None of the women that Bond encounters, almost none of the women that Bond encounters in this movie are allowed to have any agency. Mm-hmm. Like, the one, Jill is like, well, I'm helping Goldfinger commit this crime. And she probably would still be alive if she hadn't run into Bond. Mm-hmm. Right? Yeah. His freaking magical penis has killed her, essentially. Yeah. Mm-hmm. There's a sentence. But he's the reason she's dead. Mm-hmm. So then he sees her sister, who's like, I'm going to avenge my sister's death. And he's the reason she's dead too. Mm-hmm. Neither one of those women would have had their lives disrupted if frickin' James Bond hadn't been like, hello, I must have you. Go away. Yeah. So there's that. And he doesn't even seem to spare them a thought. So it's just like, oh, it's just another woman. Okay, cool. And you get introduced to these women of Pussy Galore's flying circus. You're told they fly, and you see them flying planes, and they sort of do, but that's it. That's all you know about them. Yep. There's this whole series of very attractive blonde women who fly planes, and that's it. That's all you know about them. Yeah. So again, what did it have to be them? Did they have to all be attractive blonde women? Mm-hmm. Well, no, but
I'm going to get to something about that, but yeah.
But you know what I'm saying. I have a feeling I know where you're going, but that's okay. We'll come back to that. It's just this series of women that don't have names or do have names, but you don't know them for very long. Dink. Gone. Yeah. Like, it's this series of, like, it's a revolving door of women in James Bond's bed. Yeah. Essentially. Mm-hmm. And he is manhandling all of them. Yeah. And he does it to Pussy Galore as well. Mm-hmm. He's got... sentences. He's... when she's trying to get out of the barn, that barn scene, I've literally written, what is consent? Yeah. Because, again, if you grabbed my wrist twice while I'm trying to get away from you, you're getting your nuts kicked in. I'm sorry. Yeah. And instead, it turns into this, we're fighting, we're play fighting, now we're banging in the hayloft. Yeah. Be for real.
Yeah. Yeah, so the Pussy Galore part of it. Again, the Pussy Galore of it all, if you will. Wow. So her character, she's a pilot. She's Goldfinger's private pilot, essentially. And she runs the flying circus with the 5 women that have the smaller biplanes that eventually are going to be the ones to put nerve gas out there, like they're crop dusters or something like that. It's also mentioned relatively, not early on, but when she finds him after he's snuck out of the jail, that the move she does to, like, take him down is a judo move. Yes. And he mentions, like, I didn't know you knew judo. And then when they go to the barn, that's what they're doing. They're judo sparring. That actress, actually, Honor Blackman, she knew judo quite well.
Good for her.
Because she was in a pretty famous British TV show just before this called The Avengers. Before it wasn't a comic book thing. But it was sort of the early spy craze, like The Man from U.N.C.L.E., The Avengers. There's a few of those. But she played a character that was a judo expert. And so she knew... I think that was partially why she got cast, but also they wanted to have a scene in there where it's like, hey, we're going to have a judo sparring match where it's like, now they're on equal footing because they both know this and they're play fighting, flirting, whatever you want to call it, essentially.
Yeah, fair enough. But it just, like, so ew, gross. Yeah. But I will say, she is one of the only women that we see in this movie that has agency. Yes. So I give, she play fights with Bond. The lead up to that, where he's grabbing her and not letting her leave, she does not, and that's gross, and I don't like that. Yep. You have some consent, James. Mm-hmm. Get it together. Consent is important, everyone. But she does, play, fight, flirt with him. Mm-hmm. She's the one who switches the nerve gases. She helps them switch the nerve gas for the Fort Knox situation.
Yeah.
She does have a flying circus. She teaches other women to fly. Mm-hmm. I think that's important. Like, she is shown as having agency.
Yeah.
But even when she is allowed to make her own decisions, then there's also this suggestion of, oh, well, Bond's coming, you should go slip into something more comfortable, quote unquote, or like something more appropriate. But the idea is like, go get your tits out, basically.
Yeah. So this is probably a good time to bring this up. And this is something that, again, I didn't know the first couple of times that I watched this movie.
Well, there you go. Why would I?
Because I haven't read the books. And it makes sense knowing the history of things now. In the book for Goldfinger, it is made abundantly clear that Pussy Galore is a lesbian. And there are...
What was that sound? I'm so sorry.
There are crumbs of that in the movie. With little lines here and there, and after watching the Celluloid Closet documentary that we watched a while ago, and talking about how they would hide coded messages or lines, because there was the production code, and you couldn't talk about perversion, which lesbianism and gay characters was part of that,
especially in the 60s.
And totally, and before the production code kind of went down and those went away. This was a major movie that was going in front of a bunch of people, so they couldn't just outright say, I'm a lesbian.
That's fair.
But there are lines in there where she, when Bond gets captured and wakes up on the plane and she's holding him at gunpoint, saying, no, you're now Goldfinger's guest. You're coming with us, and he tries to do the James Bond flirty whatever, like, this is the line I use on everybody. And before she goes back to the cockpit to keep flying, she says, you can turn off the charm. I'm immune.
She does, yes.
And very much the whole time she is no-selling his bullshit all of the time, even though he keeps trying. And the part where they're at the ranch later and Goldfinger sees his Bond people spying on them, and he says, well, we should show them that he's comfortable here. And so he says, you should go put on something more welcoming for our guest. And outwardly, when they're out in the barn and they're watching, she is taking him by the arm and being a little more like... And then it's only when they go into the barn and the door gets closed where she's like,
ew,
get off me, and starts throwing him around judo style, and then that's that. So there's that bit of subtext, which... when you give into that, like, okay, it makes a lot more sense for her character in that she doesn't pay any mind to this. She's, not with Goldfinger for any kind of romantic situation. He wants to keep her around for companionship or whatever.
I mean, he does the little, her because she's useful.
Yeah, exactly. But he also does the thing where he, pets her hand, so I think he's just maybe awkward around women and is...
Oh my god, did we find somebody that he's fond of? Other than Gold?
Yeah. There is one problem that goes in with that in talking about James Bond's magical penis. And after they, have sex in the barn, she is then motivated to go and narc everybody out and be like, no, this is wrong, and they're going to kill a bunch of people, and this is blah, blah, blah. But effectively she does that because James Bond's magical penis prayed the gay away, for lack of a better term. And that's...
Should we have called this episode James Bond's Magical Penis?
But that's in the book, that is very much, it's like, okay, well, he's turning a lesbian straight.
Oh, I love when you just haven't met the right dick yet. Oh,
what's
Lord.
The line from Chasing Amy? Just needed a good bit of deep dicking.
Yeah, that's true. That's how it works.
Yeah, so that there's some subcontext of that the movie couldn't bring in because it wanted to pass the censorship board, but...
I think it does, now that you've pointed it out. I have to tell you, I'm a little disappointed that I, as the queer person in this podcast and relationship, didn't read into that. But I think I was too pissed off.
Fair. You're very good at picking out the gay characters before they get...
I'm so upset that I didn't get that, because I'm so good at... And, full disclosure, because, again, if you've listened to this podcast... It's very clear. I've said this more than once. I am a bi woman. I'm usually good at finding the women who love women so fast.
Yeah.
In like video games we've played, I've called it before you have. I've called it even with ones we've played before, and you're like, oh, you're going to enjoy this one. And you give it to me, and like within the first 5 minutes, I'm like, she's a lesbian. And you're like, what? And it's like, yeah. So, and also, the concept of gaydar is not real, and that's icky, but, so just in case that's ever going to come up. But I just feel like I'm good at picking up on that subtext, and I wasn't in this one. So thank you. That's given me more to think about. Maybe that's why Pussy Galore is the only one who's allowed to have any agency, because she is, up until the barn, immune to Bond.
Yep, that's fair.
And another human and woman in this movie who is immune to Bond is the old lady.
Oh my god.
And maybe it's because she's an old woman and therefore immune to his magic penis, and that is why she's allowed to have agency. I don't know her name. She doesn't get a name. She doesn't get anything character-wise. All she gets is helping the Korean minions with moving the gate and then shooting at him. And I want to point out that my note, and this is a fun callback, I just have to find it really quick because I've written so many dead women. Cool, but is this little old lady as cool as the mom in Goodfellas? That was my opener. So the first time you see her when she's lifting the gate, I'm like, oh, she's aiding and abetting criminals, like the mom in Goodfellas. And then I've written, oh, yes, she is. Because she just goes and gets a machine gun and is like, no, I'm also a criminal.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Little German Swiss grandma just manning the gate, waving at everybody, and occasionally grabbing a gun and a clip and laying waste to an Aston Martin.
Like, she seems like she'd be making you cookies.
Yeah.
Like, she'd be making you cookies and then also shooting you if you fuck it up.
Yeah.
And I kind of love that. And those are the two women who have the most agency, or any agency truly at all in this whole movie. I think other than maybe the women who are flying the flying circus, but they choose to fly those planes.
Yeah.
So we'll go with that. I'll give them some credit there too, not to be that kind of feminist who's like, no, everything's terrible. Because maybe that's true, but the ones that you get more of a picture of, or who have any real encounters with Bond, those are the two that have agency, and that little grandma makes my heart so happy.
She's so funny. That's maybe the best. There's some funny bits in this movie. There's funny bits in every James Bond film. That's kind of the point of it. The grandma with a machine gun is one of the best laughs in early Bond, for sure.
And it's pretty great.
Yeah.
I had one more thought. The actual crime itself, right? So there's crime happening this whole time, but the big thing that this is building up to is the
Operation Grand Slam.
Operation Grand Slam, which, don't use baseball terms. How dare you? As a baseball fan, the point I am making is it is so funny to me to see the difference in how violence is portrayed in the 60s versus now. And we've talked about this. Yeah. I'm not great with egregious, gross, obscene violence. It's not a thing. But it's funny how in the 60s it almost is comical now to watch. Yeah. And so you've got, James... I mean, the fight scenes are pretty great. I'll give them that. Like, I can understand from an action movie, the car chases and the fight scenes. Totally. Especially for being in the 60s. Great.
Really well done.
Yeah. Props to them. So I can understand why this movie is popular, or these sets of movies are popular for that reason. Yeah. Just the other stuff is really like this criminal mastermind plan of we're going to use nerve gas and we're going to blow up Fort Knox. We have this big bomb. Cool. Nothing made me laugh as hard as watching everybody pass out from the nerve gas. Yeah. It's clear this movie did not have a fight choreographer who taught people how to die, because one dude just sits down at one point and then falls over oh, all of my nerves have gone. I'm just gonna sit and then lean over. It's this wild... everybody's dead thing, and it's just funny to see. It's really funny in the moment, and and it was not intended to be.
Well, no, it wasn't at all. And that scene, actually, I watched the behind the scenes bit on the Blu-ray beforehand just to refresh myself for this, and I'd forgotten about this bit of it, but they filmed the flying over Fort Knox stuff very, very late. It was the last stuff they shot. Okay. Because you can't and well, Fort Knox isn't around anymore. It got decommissioned. But you couldn't fly planes as low as they wanted to film them for like the flying circus dispersing the gas. And also to get the helicopter shots of Fort Knox and all of the people doing that. So they didn't have a lot of time. It was the last thing they shot, and all the soldiers are actually real American soldiers that were stationed at Fort Knox.
Oh, cool.
They just moved a certain group of them to all different parts, flew a helicopter over, and they gave them the instruction, and when a helicopter flies over, we need you to pass out. So none of them are real stunt actors, so it makes sense as to why it was bad.
Yeah.
And it is comical. It's really funny.
Yes, it truly is just wild. I'm looking at my note and I was like, well, that's hilarious.
Yeah.
But it makes sense if they were not actors.
Yeah, and it also does make a little bit of sense if you think of it in a story term, and that they have been told this isn't the real nerve gas, and so that they need to play along.
Right.
So they're falling down. It's really comical, but it's like, oh, they're not actually dead. Like there are some movies where, you know, you see somebody get shot or play dead and you're like, oh, overacting much, or oh, that was really funny. There's some movies where it's like, whoa, that's really... Schindler's List is one I can think of.
Yes.
Where like when someone gets shot, they fall differently to the point where you kind of go, oh,
did you actually shoot this person?
Yeah. And so it's noticeably funny. And then when they go back to it and it's like, oh, everybody was play acting, it's like, okay, I guess that kind of fits. It's also just, it is hilarious.
It is funny to watch, but it does fit the narrative.
Yeah.
And now knowing that they weren't real actors, fair.
Mm-hmm.
But I think so when we talk about advanced technology, right? Mm-hmm. So we've talked about Oddjob getting, fried in this and all these things, and they end up getting locked in Fort Knox. That bomb.
Yeah.
I've written, is this bomb just a Rube Goldberg contraption? Because when Bond takes the lid off that bomb and is like, I'm going to fix this, he's not. He's going to blow the whole thing up because he's dumb as a post. Sorry, he's super smart, my bad. But he takes the lid off and it looks like a Rube Goldberg contraption.
Yeah.
Like there's one lever hitting another thing to move it up to the... I realized that technology was different in the 60s. But did a golf ball have to slide down a rail to hit, a couple of marbles that would fly a banana into this bomb to have it go off? Like, what? The red wire, the blue wire, the trigger wire, the unhinged piece in the left side, you know, the mouse running the wheel, the hamster wheel. Like, what is going on in this bomb? Anyway.
And it ends up being a very funny set piece because he's stressing. He has
and then
like
it's
30
just
seconds.
A switch.
It's just a lever, and he doesn't even hit it. It's one of the guys saving him.
Yeah.
Just being like, hey, dum-dum, here, click.
Just
That's
use
how
the off switch.
So it's kind of a funny piece of physical comedy afterward. You're just aha.
But if it's just an off switch, why is it so Anyway, this isn't real. This is not a very big point for me.
No.
It's just, I literally have written, is this a Rube Goldberg contraption? And if you don't know what Rube Goldberg, I think Rube Goldberg machines is actually what they're called.
Yeah.
If you don't know what that is, please go look it up. They're actually super fascinating.
Yeah.
I built several as a gifted child, quote unquote, in one of my classes when I was like 8 or 9, and it was like a project from the class that was out of Connects and golf balls, I think. Mm-hmm. And it was super fun. Like they're very cool the way they get things to work. Mm-hmm. But sweet lord, is that a weird set piece. It's great. It's just odd. So it really kind of made me laugh to go with like these fainting nerve gas military dudes falling and then this. It was just a really great finish. And then my last and final thought on this is the last scene. Mm-hmm. So that airplane, and I talked a little bit about the violence. None of the... it's funny how, like, some of it's so well done, and some of it's like, so we're talking about this nerve gas and these other bombs and things. Yeah. We're also going to talk about the car crash for Tilly Masterson. Mm-hmm. She doesn't even move. Yeah. I was like, your head would have been smashed off the steering wheel, sister. So, super realistic. The airplane scene where he does himself in and he being Goldfinger, shoots the hole in the fuselage of the window and gets sucked out of the hole.
Yeah.
Also so super realistic.
Yeah.
Like hyper realism happening everywhere. And then the plane explodes. And Pussy Galore and Bond escape using the eject or grab themselves a parachute and get the hell out.
Yeah.
A big parachute, by the way. That's an aggressively large parachute based on how it looks like on the ground. But just to cap off my feelings about this movie, it ends with them searching for the survivors. Okay? And she's like, oh, they're finding us. They're in a helicopter. Let me wave. And he goes, no, I don't even remember the line because I was so mad about it.
This is no time to be rescued.
This is no time to be rescued. Yes, it is. It's always time to be rescued, sir. And then he pulls her down, wraps them in this big-ass parachute, and is like, we're going to have the sex again. Like, okay, your magic penis needs to calm the hell down and have a shower, my man. When was the last time you had a shower?
Listen, if I'm going on any commercial flight and I get home, I feel like I want to have a shower from the pressurized air. I do not feel like wanting to come home and bang immediately, let alone having jumped out of the plane with a parachute into the
ocean?
Everglades. It looks like Florida. And I'm like, how does that work? They were supposed to be in Kentucky. Anyways, somewhere over the Carolinas.
But the plane crashes into water.
Yeah.
Where? And they end up in the wooded area of wherever the hell they are. And it's like, oh, I'd love to just, have sex in this massive parachute on top of these pine needles when neither one of us has You probably smell like death, because when was the last time you actually showered James Bond? I know he gets ready in the airplane or whatever.
Yeah, because he's supposed to be going to see the President of the United States to be thanked.
So I guess maybe he did have a shower beforehand. But, what?
I mean, maybe Pussy Galore just didn't want to waste the opportunity wearing a low-cut gold top.
Yeah, that's what happened. She didn't want to waste the opportunity.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just the expression on my face at the end of that movie.
Yeah.
When that scene happened and then they cut to the credits, the deep frown. I
believe it was a frump.
I did frump. I was real mad about it. So yeah, there are parts I found joy in, but the end of this movie, I was like, oh god.
Yeah, so one of the things about James Bond movies in general, this movie is no different. There's a bit of a wah wah whenever James Bond does the clever line after something has happened.
Clever's a strong word.
Well, yeah, what they think is clever, what the writer Ian Fleming thought was clever. Or the screenwriter, because they weren't exact replicas of the books.
No, I mean, they never are.
No, but, having there are some where it's at the very beginning when he fries the dude by throwing the heater into the bathtub. Shocking. That's kind of okay, cool. But then there's ones where, after he kills Oddjob, he has one that's just a little cool. Been thinking that one up for a long time. It's like he just has this catalog of bad dad joke lines that he just is ready and waiting to talk about whatever. He has one in a previous Bond film where he's sleeping with a woman who he had early on in previous ones, and Felix calls him, or M calls him, and it's like, what are you doing? And he looks over at the woman and goes, oh, I'm just reinvestigating an old case. Ha ha ha, I'm so funny. They're kind of the for the most part kind of bring the movies down every time they happen.
Yeah.
They're just sort of oh, you're really clever. Ha ha.
It's just a bit of a womp womp.
Yeah. So to end the movie on that after what is, if you look at it self-contained, that Fort Knox scene is pretty spectacular as far as how it's staged. The production design, the inside of the vault, that's all pretty cool staging and a nice climax to the movie.
And even filming wise, right? The visuals of the flying circus and the helicopter shots and how that was all, I will say, from a film standpoint, all very cool.
Yeah, it's quite the set piece.
Now, other than that, weird ass bomb, which by the way also sounded like an MRI machine.
Yeah.
And that says a lot about how many MRIs I've had. But I was just waiting for it to start going tick, tick, tick or something, and then it would have been a real MRI. But, my feelings about the bomb aside, it was a really cool scene. And then you cut to this just like, oh, sadness, Everdeen. Why is this like womp womp? And then it's like, don't worry, he'll be back. No, I worry. If he is back, why do I have to see Thunderball? I'm good. Cool.
Yeah.
But again, I'm not cut out for 60s James Bond. That's what we've learned today.
Yeah, and so again, real talking, getting ready for this, I had 2 Bond films that were Connerys that I was thinking of putting in here. One was Goldfinger, the other one was From Russia with Love. So I went back and rewatched both of them before this. The ending for From Russia with Love also ends on a note where you're like, oh, haha, James Bond is sleeping with a girl and it's the blah, blah, blah.
How
like,
clever.
ends on a joke.
Yeah, like, he's got to have a magic penis. He must. Because he's pretty to look at. I'll give you that.
Yeah.
And he's got the accent, which is pretty attractive, I guess. It is. Oh, I guess. Who am I kidding? I say sitting across the table from my husband. But like, I can understand the physical appeal of James Bond. But the moment you've spoken to this man who has a license to kill, he's about as exciting as watching paint dry. Or maybe that's unfair. Because he's, got a license to kill. So he's maybe the thrill is very exciting. Yeah. But he's kind of a dum-dum.
Yeah, and actually, good segue, because there is a part that I wanted to mention if you didn't, about this movie in particular.
Floor is yours.
James Bond movies are always, okay, this is a mission, I am going to do blah, blah, blah. This movie is quite different in some ways, because when he is originally introduced to who Goldfinger is, they're in Miami, he's at the hotel, and Felix comes in and says, this is who you're going to be tracking.
Yeah, this guy.
Give him a bit of information about him, and he says, so what's his deal? And Felix says, M will fill you in. Just keep an eye on him. And he doesn't. He involves himself into into Goldfinger's business before he even knows what's going on.
Yes, true. He does do that. Yeah.
And so he does I'm going to steal the key, go into the hotel room, meets Jill, who is helping him cheat.
Just can't help myself.
Just can't, and gets on the radio thing and blah, blah, blah. Goldfinger, you should start losing. Your days are numbered, blah, blah, blah. He still doesn't know anything about what he's supposed to be doing with it. He's just
maybe
involved
he's not supposed to off this dude.
And he doesn't off him, but he just is I'm going to antagonize him a little bit.
But you know what I mean? Maybe there's a reason, he's your next target, but do you know he's actually a criminal, or do you,
he doesn't know anything about him. He might just be watching him. He never knows.
Once again, James Bond is a dum-dum.
So because of that, he meets Jill.
Jill
falls in love with his magical penis. And, they get caught having sex. Oddjob sneaks in, karate chops him so that he knocks him out. He wakes up. Jill is painted in gold paint, asphyxiated, skin asphyxiation, which is apparently actually a real thing. I discovered that too.
It is a real thing. Yeah. And if there's one thing I learned from Jill's death, this is why we don't wear a lot of makeup. Thanks.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But kind of when it cuts to he calls Felix and says the girl's dead, you need to come over here, and the next dissolves into him being in M's office. Yeah. And he's talking about she died because of skin asphyxiation, gold this, and he's like, and I know who did it. She was covered in gold paint. And you can, so that after watching it a couple of times, you can kind of tell it at least is appearing he's a bit shaken, because he's just I've never seen somebody die that way. Yeah. And he tells them, he's I'd be happy to continue this mission if I knew what it was about. So he basically, a girl is dead because he stuck his nose in where it shouldn't have been. Yeah. And that's not good, and there is the tiniest bit of remorse before actually getting into whatever. But not enough to really register, which is accurate for his character, unfortunately. So that happens. We have a dead girl because of something he did that he shouldn't have. Then you have her sister, Tilly, who is trying to speed by him, and so he does the thing where he thinks she's coming after him, so he punctures her tires, tries to get one up on her, even after saying like, oh, I'm going to chase after her, and he says, nope, discipline, blah, blah, blah. But he chases after her after she shoots at him, aiming for Goldfinger like they're along that Swiss highway. She's a shitty shot. She misses Goldfinger. She almost hits James. So he thinks she's coming after her. And then when he's staked out Goldfinger's smelting enterprise, she also appears in black because, he's like, what are you doing here? He says, I'm trying to kill him. He killed my sister. Figuring out, you're Jill's sister. Okay, but she hits the tripwire with her gun, and so the henchmen have been alerted, come after them. So again, he's get in the car. They try and outrun him. They're pretty successful for most parts of it. And then there's a part where he says, we're going to put the bulletproof screen up. When I say go, run for the woods and get out of here. He says go, she runs for the woods. Oddjob smokes her in the head with his metal hat. Yeah. Breaks her neck. She's dead. So he is now, through his own incompetence and arrogance, has 2 women that are dead. And I think that's why he actually gives himself up, because he goes to her first, being like, oh, now she's dead. And he just kind of gives himself up. Yeah. And it's just like, so now you have 2 people that are dead because you're not good at this, or because of something directly that he did. Yeah. Then there's the whole thing. Then there's the whole thing where he does the ejector seat thing, which is, I love the guy getting ejected out. It's like, wee! Right out. Yeah. It's so funny.
It does feel that way.
But then he gets captured again because he's driving around the compound and he thinks he's gotten away from him and crashes into the wall when he thinks there's another car coming at him. And this actually is, I don't know if it got in with that scene, but he sees a mirror.
Yeah, it's like he sees a mirror. Yeah. He doesn't see another car.
So he crashes his own car and is unconscious, and that's how he gets captured and put on the gold slab, and we're gonna snip his balls off with a laser. But like, again, it's like, through my own actions, I'm now caught again. Effectively through this whole movie, James Bond does almost nothing. Yeah. He is unsuccessful at 98% of the things he does.
I think is he actually an effective spy?
Yeah. And in other James Bond movies and stories, he is. I think the reason that this one maybe stands out in some people's eyes that are James Bond fans, and I think me having seen not everything comprehensively, but Goldfinger is great. Goldfinger is probably the best villain in the whole series.
I'm in. Yeah.
And he's ahead of James Bond at every step. And the only things that James Bond actually does well are hear the words Operation Grand Slam, not know what it is, and convince Goldfinger that he should keep him alive because he mentioned these words. Right. And Goldfinger says, you could have just heard that. James Bond said, well, can you afford to take that chance? Yeah. 008 knows everything I know. They'll just come after you and go, no, you're worth more to me alive than dead.
Good point.
Take the castration laser off, kill, please.
Fair point.
And then the only other thing he actually does properly is convert Pussy Galore to the other side with his magical penis.
And again, properly is a strong word for that.
Gets his way, I guess.
Successful, quote unquote. At
that's it. He does electrify Oddjob, but only after kind of getting manhandled by him, and he doesn't even dismantle the bomb. No. Like, he doesn't do anything in this movie, which is hilarious. But
kind of completely useless.
Yeah, which kind of makes it interesting in certain ways, because you're just like, he's put in peril and is alive for the grace of the villains rather than anything.
Yeah, I mean, other than maybe the beginning where he comes in as a floating duck and sets the whatever. That's the only time that you see something in this movie that he's done successfully.
Mm. And that's a different mission that he's doing whatever with, and we don't know about it, but it's like, okay, yeah, this, and almost all Bond movies are that. I'm stealing a decoding machine. I am stopping a blah, blah, blah. Yeah. This one is just like, no, because of his own arrogance, he gets innocent people killed. And
he doesn't know what the goal is. He doesn't bother to listen.
Yeah. And when he does know, he can't really execute because the people he's after are 2 steps ahead of him. So it's an interesting entry into that because of that reason. It's like Bond was the director talked about it. He's like, a couple of movies in, I could feel like Bond was becoming a superhero, and I didn't want to make him a superhero, even though that's what happened in other movies afterwards.
Fair.
It's the one that's like, we kind of need to knock him down a peg, and it's like, well, you're a ladies' man, you sleep with these women, and now they're dead because you stuck your nose in when you shouldn't have.
You stuck your penis in when you shouldn't have.
Stuck your penis in when you shouldn't have, I guess, in
Jill's case. Is it magical or deadly?
Well, that's for you to decide, I suppose.
Well, this has been fun.
Yeah. Is there anything else you wanted to bring up before
You have a thought. All yours.
Okay. Other than that, like, I think it's, James Bond movies are funny. They are I think when you talked about them being like serialized sort of things, that's how they're meant to be digested. There's nothing to take serious about them. The new James Bonds, and I've only actually really seen Casino Royale.
Ooh, wait a minute. I've seen more new James Bond than you have?
Which is quite good.
Yeah.
But it also didn't inspire me to watch any of the other ones, so...
fair.
Maybe?
I like Daniel Craig, and I think because when they came out, I was like, okay, cool. But I haven't watched a ton either, to be fair.
Yeah. And Casino Royale is quite good. The new Bonds started taking Bond way more seriously than the old ones. Like, that's the thing about these movies. They are not meant to be taken seriously at all. And they were always meant as popcorn fare. You can't really stack this movie up to a lot of other spy movies because this is fairy tale. This is for children, essentially.
And I think that's why when you said this was an Oscar winner, my eyebrows shot up because I was like, really? This movie? But okay.
And I actually, when I looked it up, I sort of thought, I'm like, oh, I wonder if this is won any awards. And I was actually surprised when it was won Oscar, it was for sound. Not because the sound's bad. I think the sound's very good.
I like the varying uses of the Goldfinger song throughout the movie.
And that's actually where I thought this Oscar would have come from, because there's two people specifically that were involved with Bond movies for a long time that are what you would consider quote unquote masters of what they do. One of them is John Barry, who is the score composer.
Okay.
And is the person that did the backing track for Shirley Bassey's rendition of Goldfinger.
Okay, fair, yeah.
The bombastic horns and everything.
Yeah. See, I said it was going to happen at least once more.
John Barry is, I think, a 5-time Oscar winner for score or music in various capacities.
So that would make sense.
He's done, not only that, he's also done some very iconic scores and soundtracks, and even ones from less popular movies that have become really well known as, like, samples in other songs. So in actually going through this again, I'm like, oh my god, that's a sample from Six Underground. So when Jill is dead in bed, like covered in gold paint,
just the way you said. So when Jill is dead.
So when Jill is dead, there's a bit of score that is a snippet for a sample of a song called Six Underground by Sneaker Pimps, which if I played it for you, you'd be like, oh, that song, I just never knew the title of it from the 90s.
This happens to us a lot.
But it's a really slow, like, bum, 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 and it is very, very low.
You've done such a great job. I know exactly the song.
But if you Google that song, and it plays again and again and again, that song. Portishead really famously sampled John Barry from, not from a Bond film, but from, I think it's the Ipcris File, which I just watched. They've also, the Propellerheads sampled multiple John Barry James Bond things.
He's a big deal.
He's a big deal. If you were a British trip-hop or electronic act in the 90s, you probably sampled John Barry stuff at some point in time. So I actually was surprised it wasn't John Barry's score, because it's iconic. Like, you hear not only the regular Bond theme, but like everybody knows the song Goldfinger. You play it and it's
Dingle Frog.
Dingle Frog. I'm going to bring that up in a second. The other master of stuff in James Bond is a guy named Ken Adam, who is the production designer.
Yes, Ken Adam flagged for me as well.
But go ahead. We've seen some movies that he'd done. Doctor Strangelove.
That might be why it flagged for me, actually.
The War Room in Doctor Strangelove is so reminiscent of, like, Goldfinger's stuff.
Yes. Yeah, that's exactly why I was like, oh, I know this name.
Yeah, and he's phenomenal. He's also worked on many other things other than Bond. But like, even just if you were to watch this movie and ignore the story entirely and just looked at the design of the sets, because most of this was actually shot on sets.
Yeah.
Fort Knox was all a set.
That makes sense.
It also
you couldn't actually film in Fort Knox.
No, you could
they wouldn't
not.
let you do that.
They didn't actually give them even like pictures or a blueprint of what Fort Knox looks like on the inside.
Well,
it's
which
classified.
Again makes sense.
So that whole like multi-floor thing with gold is just Ken Adams' imagination, and it's pretty cool.
It's a pretty cool imagination to have.
So there's so much of it that is really well plotted out, and for it to all happen on like Pinewood Studios in London is pretty cool. So that was where I thought the Oscars would have been, because Ken Adam and John Barry are both like
and that wasn't
titans.
it at all.
Yeah,
which is wild.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's pretty good. You mentioned Dingle Frog.
I did.
So we have a joke, like an inside joke sort of, that you and I will reference it several times. Someone on the internet a number of years ago basically re-photoshopped all of the classic James Bond movie posters, but made the movie titles anagrams for different things. And they are some of the funniest, like, just pieces of artwork manipulated internet humor. Like, instead of Dr. No, that one's Ron D. The Living Daylights is Lively Dating Thighs. Thunderball is The Dull Barn.
Which is kind of, the Dull Barn happened in this movie.
Hilarious. There's a, like, Quantum of Solace is Foul Macaque Snot. Like, it's really funny.
It's such a gross image.
I know. And the one for Goldfinger is Dingle Frog. And just imagining Shirley Bassing singing Dingle Frog is really funny to me.
Aw, that was my third instance of me doing the Goldfinger song. I feel like this is an appropriate time to call that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But yes, so Dingle Frog brings me joy.
Dingle Frog is great.
If we can find the link to those things, we'll put it in the show notes if we can. But if not, good luck Googling. It's hilarious.
Yeah. If you go James Bond anagram posters, you'll probably find them.
Again, if we can find the original source, we'll do our best to share that, because I do love those.
Yeah. There is also a little interesting footnote with this movie and the previous two, Dr. No and From Russia with Love.
Ron D. Yeah.
These are the only 3 Bond movies to actually have a release from Criterion.
Interesting.
They are in the Criterion Collection Laserdisc set.
Oh, a Laserdisc.
Yeah, so they put them out in the early 90s, before DVD was around, when Criterion Collection was doing Laserdisc only. And they actually, after being sold for I don't know how long, were pulled from circulation because the producers, Harry Saltzman and Albert Broccoli, basically asked that they be removed because of the commentary tracks that were on them. And you can find these online. I think YouTube has these banned commentary tracks about these 3 Bond films. And they have the directors, so Terrence Young from the earlier ones, Guy Hamilton from this one. They have Ken Adam talking about production design stuff. They have Richard, I'm going to get his last name wrong, the screenwriter for all 3 of them. And there's also someone else that was involved with the production somewhere. And then somebody that's like a historian narrating part of it. Commentary tracks are weird back then. So I've listened to them because I was like, why did they get pulled and why are they banned? Yeah. It's not like the most salacious thing in the world, but there's a lot of stuff in it that's very... it's almost like a bunch of old British men gossiping about shit. Whether it's about the movie or, like, there's a line that Guy Hamilton has, or maybe it's Terrence Young has in one of them, where he's talking about how, like, James Connery was shirtless in a scene.
Okay.
And he's talking about, like, Sean's sucking in his stomach there. He'd gained some weight on the set at this point in time. It's like kind of petty little, like, gossip magazine things where you're just like, why would you even say that? Like, that's not... for no reason.
To what end here?
To what end? And there's a lot of that. There's also a few not so PC things that are mentioned. In some a lot of which, like, there's some comments about some of the Bond women, just about like how how stunningly attractive they are, and blah blah, kind of go into more dude bro detail. And it's like,
yeah, you know,
these,
there's enough of that with Bond. We don't need that in a commentary.
yeah. So like, I mean, it was weird back then.
Sure.
And this is a bunch of old British dudes that still can't get over their heyday of Bond, and probably have a bunch of misogyny in them themselves, just like the Bond character would have probably. But yeah, it's an interesting little like tidbit that there's these commentary tracks that just aren't on any releases anymore. You can find them on YouTube, which is hilarious. But
I don't think I will.
No.
I do enjoy random tidbits with Matt, though. It's like a sub-segment of a segment around here.
Sub-segment, yeah.
Anyway.
Anyways, and so this is, you know, this is early James Bond. If you've seen one, you've seen most of them. And most of the rest of them are not anywhere near as good as far as some of the technical things. After this movie, James Bond got very, very gadgety.
Oh, like a little more get smart, a little less.
Yeah.
Well, maybe he needed to get smart, but that's a different story.
Yeah, and Get Smart is actually very much a parody of that gadgety aspect of James Bond.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
You know, the villains get even more comically over the top and based on stereotypes. Like Goldfinger is very much, even though it's not said, based on Nazi German stereotypes.
Oh, absolutely it is.
You know, the gold bar that Bond uses to entice him during the golf game is from a Nazi gold storage that the Bank of England has. So there's allusions to it. There's even some things about the women flying the planes in the flying circus all being bleach blonde, relating potentially to Nazi ideals and Aryan race sort of thing.
Yeah, that's very fair.
So,
that makes sense. That's why they're all blonde the whole movie. Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, there's those illusions in there as well, but like they just get more overt as the Bond movies go on, and they're really caricatures for a very long time.
Well,
so you're not missing anything.
I mean, I don't know that I was before, but normally at the end of these, this is where the person who hadn't seen it before gives it a 5 thumbs up out of 6 or whatever.
I think we know where you would lean with this one.
Dear God, I never need to see this movie again. I'm not going to give it an anything. Like, I'm going to... one dead... No, I'm just kidding. It's like a 1 bumbling Bond decision out of 5 for me.
1 magical penis out of 5.
Oh, it's a good way of putting that. Yeah, we'll go with that. Again, I've said it at several points here. I understand why it's a popcorn film, so I understand why they are so popular. I understand why this series is so popular. I get it. Not a fan. No. Did not enjoy watching this movie. Did not have I've had a great time talking about it with you.
Yeah.
Not my fave. Cool if I never watch a Sean Connery Bond again.
Yeah. And it's a movie that I've watched it a few times now. I don't know how many times. As a just pure put it on for entertainment type of movie to turn your brain off to. It works really well, and there are parts of it. Sure. If you're turning that off, it's not how you and I watch movies.
Even if I'm going to, I have other options, but that's fair. I know. Yeah. I know what you're saying. Yeah. It's not my. It's fine.
If I need to scratch an itch for an old James Bond movie, it's pretty much one of the first 3 for me, and it doesn't happen that often. So, it is exactly what it is, and really not much more than that. And it was kind of the original movie franchise that still lives to this day.
And there's something cool to be said about that, I guess. But,
yeah, for sure.
Because that's 60 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the longevity of it's pretty astounding.
Man, other points in this podcast we've been like, it's 30 years ago and felt really, really old. Saying the 60s or 60 years ago doesn't have the same hit, and yet it kind of does.
Because neither of us were alive back then.
Well, yeah, we're not that old. Sorry to anybody who is.
Yeah, so that is episode 007.
I said sorry to anybody who is, like, I'm sorry you're old. I mean, apologies for calling you old. So that's 007. For the next episode,
yes,
I can't believe you haven't seen the 2004, talking about years ago, American independent satirical black comedy with Mandy Moore in it, Saved.
And that will be episode 8, coming in 3 weeks' time from when this goes live. Thank you, everyone, for listening along, as per usual. As I mentioned before, we do have an Instagram, which we have little audiograms and things coming up to let you know when our next episode is. And
we should probably tell them what the Instagram is, dear.
Yes, I can't believe you haven't seen, I think is just what it is.
You know, it's the I can't believe you have I can't believe you haven't seen on Instagram.
Yes, that is us. Follow along there. We do also have our episodes on YouTube now. So if you like your podcast episode with audio wave files on the front of it, little synthesizer things, we're there. We have a TikTok that we put all of our reels on.
And Matt's got a Letterboxd if you want to follow along with his thoughts about movies, not necessarily related to this, but Matt's movie collection.
Yeah, at Maddie236 is that one. So until our next episode.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you for listening. Take care.